Dad's silent revenge.
I was standing in my garage, grease under my fingernails from fixing my neighbor's lawnmower, when my phone buzzed with a text that would change everything. The message was from my 8-year-old granddaughter, Nancy. "Grandpa Harold, why can't you come to Mommy's graduation party? I made you a picture." That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. My name's Harold Peterson, I'm 58 years old, and for the past 2 years, I'd been writing checks for $42,000 each year to pay for my daughter Beverly's MBA program at Northwestern. You'd think that would earn me a seat at her graduation ceremony, right? Let me back up and tell you how I got here. After my wife Dorothy passed away 5 years ago from cancer, I threw myself into making sure my kids had every opportunity I never did. I'm a retired mechanical engineer, worked 32 years at Consolidated Manufacturing here in Ohio. Started there when I was 26, right out of college, worked my way up from junior engineer to plant supervisor. Dorothy and I, we saved every penny we could. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. The house was paid off, retirement account was solid, and we had a little nest egg for emergencies. When Beverly came to me 2 years ago saying she wanted to go back to school for her MBA, I didn't hesitate for a second. She was working as a marketing coordinator at some mid-sized company, making decent money but stuck in middle management. She had bigger dreams. Dad, Shed said, sitting at my kitchen table where Dorothy used to make her famous Sunday pot roast. "This program at Northwestern is my shot. It's $42,000 a year, but the connections it'll make, the career opportunities. I can pay you back once I land that executive position." I looked at her sitting there, 30 years old, determined as hell, and I saw Dorothy's ambition burning in her eyes. Beverly had always been our go-getter. Honor roll in high school, dean's list in college, always pushing herself to be better. Dorothy used to say Beverly got her drive from watching me work double shifts to afford her dance lessons and college application fees. "Sweetheart," I said, "you don't pay me back. You make the most of it? That's payment enough for your old man." Her eyes filled up with tears. "Dad, that's $84,000. That's your retirement money. Dorothy and I saved that money to give our kids opportunities. This is exactly what it's for." So I wrote the checks. $42,000 in August 2022, another $42,000 in August 2023. That's $84,000 of the money Dorothy and I had scripted and saved for 30 years. Every dollar represented overtime shifts, skipped vacations, coupon clipping, and Dorothy's side job doing bookkeeping for local businesses. But seeing Beverly excited about marketing strategies and business plans, watching her light up when she talked about brand management and corporate leadership, it felt worth every penny. My son Eugene has a different story entirely. He teaches 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary, makes about $45,000 a year, and never asked me for a dime except maybe help with Christmas presents for little Nancy. Eugene's the steady one, the one who calls every Sunday, the one who stops by to check on me without being asked. He married his college sweetheart Linda, they've got Nancy, and they're happy with their simple life. Eugene always said he was grateful just to have dinner with his old man once a week, but Beverly, she was going places. She had plans, ambitions, dreams bigger than our little Ohio town, at least. That's what I thought. Things started feeling off around Christmas last year. Beverly would come over for our traditional Christmas Eve dinner, but she'd spend half the time on her phone talking about her study group and networking events. She started dressing different too. Designer clothes that looked expensive, handbag that probably cost more than Eugene makes in a month, jewelry I knew she couldn't afford on her graduate assistant salary of maybe $15,000 a year. Business school is about image. Dad, Shed say when E'd raise an eyebrow at her outfit, you have to look successful to be successful. It's all about networking and making the right impressions. I figured she knew what she was doing. She was the one in business school, not me. I was just a guy who knew how to fix machines and solve engineering problems. What did I know about corporate networking? But then came that text from Nancy in early March, just 2 months before graduation. I called Eugene immediately, my hands actually shaking as I dialed his number. "Eugene, what's this about Beverly's graduation?" Nancy thinks I'm not invited to the ceremony. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear his kids playing in the background, normal family sounds that suddenly made my empty house feel even quieter. "Dad, I think you need to talk to Beverly directly about that. I'm talking to you first. What's going on, son?" Another pause, longer this time, Beverly said. She said the graduation reception is for students and their professional networks only. She said it wouldn't be appropriate for family members to attend. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut and knocked all the air out of my lungs. Professional networks. Eugene, I paid $84,000 for that education. I think that makes me pretty damn invested in her professional future. I know, Dad, I told her the same thing. But Shez got this new boyfriend now, Leonard something, and he's some kind of investment banker from Chicago. I think has been filling her head with ideas about image and networking and all that business school stuff. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dorothy, how proud Shed been when Beverly graduated college summa cum laude, how Shed always said Beverly would do great things. That girl's got fire in her belly, Dorothy used to say. She's going to change the world. This wasn't the daughter Wed raised. This wasn't the girl who used to help me rebuild engines in the garage who learned to change oil because she wanted to understand how things worked. The next morning, I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I got on LinkedIn something I barely understood but had set up when I retired because Eugene said it was important to stay connected. I searched for Beverly's profile, and what I found made my blood run cold. There were photos from some business conference in Chicago from just 2 weeks ago. Beverly was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Eugene makes in a month, standing next to this Leonard character who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. The guy was tall, perfectly groomed, expensive watch, the whole 9 yards. The caption under Beverly's post read, "Grateful for the opportunities that come with hard work and dedication, building tomorrow's leaders today. Ambia Life networking success, future leader hard work and dedication. No mention of her father had been funding this hard work with his life savings." I scrolled through more posts, going back months. Photos from expensive restaurants in downtown Chicago, weekend trips to wine country in California, networking events at country clubs that probably cost more to join than I made in a year. All of it happening while I was supposed to believe she was struggling to pay for groceries and textbooks. Then I found the post that broke my heart completely. It was from February, a photo of her at some business leadership symposium at a fancy hotel. She was wearing a dress that looked like it came from one of those stores where they don't even put price tags on things. Someone in the comments had asked about her background, where she came from, and Beverly had responded, "I'm focused on building my own legacy." Sometimes you have to leave the past behind to embrace the future you're creating. Leave the past behind. That past was me. That past was Dorothy. That past was the woman who cleaned houses on weekends to help pay for Beverly's college textbooks, the man who worked double shifts during Christmas season so we could afford her sorority fees and study abroad program. I closed the laptop and sat in my workshop for hours, just thinking, Dorothy always said I was too patient, too willing to see the best in people even when they were showing me their worst. But she also taught me that respect has to be earned and maintained, and that sometimes the people you love most are the ones who need the hardest lessons. Beverly wasn't just taking my money, she was taking my dignity and throwing it away like yesterday's newspaper. That's when I decided to do something I'd never done before in my 58 years of life. I was going to fight back, but I was going to do it smart. I was going to use my engineering brain to solve this problem systematically, the way I'd solved production problems at the plant for 3 decades. First thing I did was gather all the evidence. I printed out every bank statement showing the $84,000 in tuition payments over 2 years. I took screenshots of every single one of Beverly's LinkedIn and Facebook posts, showing her expensive lifestyle choices. I went through my credit card statements and found receipts for all the times ID helped her with emergency expenses that were apparently being spent on designer clothes and weekend getaways. Next, I did what any good engineer does when facing a complex problem. I researched the system. I spent 6 weeks learning everything I could about Northwestern's MBA program, their student conduct policies, their financial aid guidelines. Turned out they have very strict rules about how educational funds are supposed to be used and about students honestly representing their financial situations. I learned that MBA students are expected to maintain certain ethical standards, especially when it comes to financial transparency. The program has an honor code that specifically mentions misrepresenting financial circumstances as grounds for academic review, probation, or even dismissal. Then I started documenting Beverly's actual spending habits. Not with some expensive private investigator like you see in movies, but the old-fashioned way. I drove up to Chicago on 3 different weekends over 6 weeks, staying at a cheap motel near campus. I followed her to restaurants, networking events, shopping trips. I took photos of her coming out of stores carrying bags that cost more than most people's monthly rent. What I found was a pattern of someone living a completely different life than the struggling graduate student Shed been presenting to me. I discovered that Beverly was spending $200 on single dinners, $800 on shoes, $1,500 on handbags, all while telling me she could barely afford her $900 monthly rent for what turned out to be a luxury apartment in Lincoln Park. The rent alone should have been a red flag. No graduate student living on financial aid could afford a place like that. I also found out more about Leonard Whitfield. Investment banker, yes, but also a guy with a history, according to some online research. Had been engaged twice before to women in professional programs. relationships that ended right after they graduated and got their first jobs. I seen his type before in my engineering career. Guys who used people like stepping stones, always looking for the next opportunity to climb higher. 8 weeks before graduation, I made my move. I drove up to Chicago unannounced on a Thursday evening. I told Beverly I wanted to take her out for a pre-graduation dinner to celebrate her upcoming achievement, but Shed made excuses every time I suggested it. Said she was too busy with final projects, too swamped with recruiting events, too exhausted from networking. I parked outside her apartment building, a gleaming high-rise that definitely wasn't student housing, and called her from the lobby. Dad, what are you doing here? I told you I was busy this week. I'm in your lobby, sweetheart. I drove 3 hours to see you. Can you come down for just a few minutes? We need to talk. When she came down 20 minutes later, I barely recognized my own daughter. Designer everything from head to toe, shoes that probably cost $600, a purse that looked like it belonged in a museum, jewelry that caught the light like it was made of real diamonds. This wasn't the girl who used to wear my old work shirts when she helped me rebuild carburetors, who learned to use a socket wrench because she wanted to understand how engines worked. Beverly, I want to show you something, I said, pulling out a thick folder I'd prepared. These are bank statements showing every penny I've paid for your education over the past 2 years. And these are printouts from your social media showing how you've been spending your time and money. Her face went white as fresh paint. Dad, I can explain all of this. Can you explain why you told people online that you're building your own legacy and leaving the past behind? Can you explain why your granddaughter thinks I'm not good enough to come to your graduation ceremony? She looked around the fancy lobby like she was embarrassed to be seen with me. Like I was some vagrant who'd wandered in off the street, instead of the man who'd made her privileged life possible. Dad, you don't understand how business school works. Image matters here. The people I'm networking with, they expect a certain level of sophistication. Level of sophistication? Beverly, I'm the level of sophistication that made your fancy networking possible. I'm the sophistication that paid for that outfit you're wearing and the apartment you're living in. I know, and I'm grateful. But Leonard says that in the corporate world, you have to present yourself as someone who belongs there naturally. Having a father who works with his hands, it sends the wrong message to potential employers and business contacts. That's when I knew I'd lost her completely. This wasn't just about graduation or some boyfriend's bad influence. This was about who Beverly had chosen to become, and it wasn't anyone Dorothy and I had raised. Beverly, here's what's going to happen, I said, keeping my voice calm and level the way I did when I was dealing with a serious problem at the plant. I'm going to your graduation ceremony whether I'm invited or not, and I'm going to have a conversation with Dean Melvin Carter about student conduct policies and how MBA candidates are expected to represent themselves honestly to their funding sources. You can't do that, Dad. You'll ruin everything I've worked for. Sweetheart, I think you already did that yourself. I left her standing in that lobby, probably trying to figure out how to explain to her doorman why she'd been arguing with someone who looked like he belonged in a factory instead of her upscale building. Graduation day came 6 weeks later, and I showed up in my best suit, the same navy blue one-eyed worn to Dorothy's funeral and Eugenie's wedding. I brought my folder of documentation and printed copies of every social media post Beverly had made about her lifestyle over the past 2 years. The ceremony itself was held in a big auditorium on Northwestern's campus. I watched Beverly walk across that stage to get her diploma, and for just a moment, I felt the pride Dorothy would have felt. Our daughter had accomplished something significant even if she'd lost her way in the process. But it was the networking reception afterward where I made my play. I found Dean Melvin Carter during the cocktail hour, introduced myself as Beverly Peterson's father and primary financial contributor to her education. I explained that I had some concerns about how educational funds were being represented and used. Dean Carter was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, the kind of guy who'd probably seen every type of student and parent over his decades in academia. He looked through my documentation for about 15 minutes, his expression growing more serious with each page. Bank statements, social media, screenshots, receipts, timeline of events. I'd organized it all like an engineering report, clear and methodical. Finally, he looked up at me and said, "Mr. Peterson, this is very troubling. We have strict policies about financial transparency and ethical conduct for our MBA candidates. We'll need to schedule a formal review with Miss Peterson next week." Across the reception hall, I could see Beverly watching us, her face pale as fresh snow. Leonard was next to her, probably calculating how this would affect his own reputation in their social circle. I watched him lean over and whisper something in her ear, and even from a distance I could see her shoulders slump. When Dean Carter called Beverly over, I watched my daughter try to explain away 2 years of deception and manipulation. She claimed the expensive lifestyle was necessary networking, that building professional relationships required a certain image, that Shed always planned to pay me back once she landed her executive position. Peterson, Dean Carter said in a voice that had probably disciplined hundreds of students over the years, you signed documents at the beginning of your program stating that your family was providing financial assistance based on demonstrated need. These social media posts and documented expenses suggest a level of discretionary spending that directly contradicts that representation. Beverly started crying then, not the graceful tears of someone who's genuinely sorry, but the panicked tears of someone who's been caught and knows the consequences are coming. Leonard took a step back from her, literally distancing himself as her world started crashing down. I can explain everything, she said, her voice shaking. The clothes, the dinners, Leonard paid for most of that. I never used Dad's money for personal expenses, but I'd done my homework. Dean Carter, I said, I have records showing that my daughter requested additional emergency funds 17 times over the past 2 years, totaling $12,000 beyond the tuition payments. Each request was for supposed educational necessities, textbooks, computer equipment, conference fees. The receipts show these funds were spent on luxury items. Dean Carter nodded grimly. Ms. Peterson, we'll need you to meet with the Academic Review Board on Tuesday morning. Until this matter is resolved, your degree conferment will be held pending investigation. Beverly graduated that day, but with an asterisk that followed her for months. Academic probation, mandatory ethics courses, and a work-study program to repay the misspent funds to the university's general scholarship fund. She also had to write formal letters of apology to every professor Hod recommended her for networking opportunities. Leonard disappeared from her life within a week, just like Id predicted. Turns out when you're dating someone for their connections and success potential, academic probation and ethical violations are immediate deal breakers. That night, Beverly called me around midnight, crying harder than Id heard since she was a little girl Hod fallen off her bike and scraped both knees. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I got caught up in trying to be someone else and I forgot who I really am. Beverly, I didn't do this to humiliate you or destroy your career. I did it because I love you enough to hold you accountable. That's what real fathers do. I know. I wanted to fit in so badly with these people. Leonard made me feel like my background, our family, was something to be ashamed of instead of proud of. Your background is working people who saved every penny to give you opportunities most folks only dream about. There is nothing shameful about honest work and sacrifice. How do I fix this, Dad? How do I make this right? You start by remembering where you came from and who raised you. You stop trying to impress people who don't deserve your respect, and you figure out how to be successful without forgetting the people who helped you get there. It took months, but slowly Beverly started finding her way back to the person Dorothy and I had raised. She took a job at a smaller consulting firm, one that valued her skills and work ethic more than her ability to network at country clubs. She moved out of that expensive apartment into something she could actually afford. She stopped posting lifestyle photos on social media and started sharing articles about business ethics and corporate responsibility. Eugene, who'd watched this whole mess unfold from the sidelines, told me he was proud of how Ed handled it. Dad, you taught Beverly a lesson about respect and integrity without destroying the family. That takes real wisdom. Your mother always said the hardest part of being a parent is knowing when to stop helping and start expecting. 6 months after graduation, Beverly showed up at my house on a Saturday morning. I was in my workshop rebuilding a transmission for my neighbor's old Chevy when I heard her car pull into the driveway. She came out to the garage wearing jeans and one of my old work shirts, looking more like my daughter than she had in years. Can you teach me how to do that? She asked, pointing at the transmission parts spread across my workbench. Since when are you interested in mechanical work? Since I remembered that my father built everything I have with these hands, I want to understand how things really work, not just how they look. We worked on that transmission for 4 hours, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I had my real daughter back. She asked questions about torque specifications and gear ratios, got her hands dirty, cursed when she dropped a bolt, laughed when I told her stories about the first car Ed ever rebuilt. Dad, she said as we were cleaning up, I want you to know that I tell everyone about you now, about how you worked double shifts to pay for my college, about how you taught me that real success comes from helping the people you love achieve their dreams. What do people say when you tell them that? The ones worth knowing say they wish they had a father like you. The ones who aren't worth knowing don't matter anymore. Looking back on that whole experience, I realized what I really taught Beverly wasn't just about money or respect. I taught her that authentic success comes from honoring the people who believed in you first, not from impressing strangers who might abandon you the moment you're not useful anymore. Dorothy would have been proud. Not just of Beverly for finding her way back to her values, but of me for finding the backbone to guide her there without losing our relationship completely. These days, Beverly calls me every Sunday morning. She asks about my projects, tells me about her work, and sometimes she brings her new boyfriend Marcus around to meet the blue-collar father who raised her. Marcus is a high school math teacher who thinks it's cool that I can rebuild engines and respects the fact that I supported my daughter's education. And you know what? The guys who stick around are always the ones who can appreciate good, honest work when they see it. Beverly's doing just fine now. She learned that real networking isn't about hiding who you are, it's about being so good at what you do that your background becomes an asset, not a liability. And sometimes the most important lesson a parent can teach is when to stop enabling and start expecting the respect you've earned. I still have that text from Nancy saved on my phone. Grandpa Harold, why can't you come to Mommy's graduation party? Now she asks when coming to her school plays, her soccer games, her birthday parties. Because her mother finally remembered that some invitations should never have to be earned. They should be given freely to the people who love you most. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone you love is the refusal to enable their worst impulses, even when it hurts both of you in the short term. Real family isn't about who shows up when times are good, it's about who has the courage to hold you accountable when you've lost your way.